Get started if that's all right with everybody. Fantastic. Well, hello and thank you everyone for joining us today as we launch the revised version of the Domestic Abuse Toolkit with our partners, the Employees Initiative on Domestic Abuse, or EIDA. As part of today's program, we're going to hear from a panel of speakers from the organizations that sponsor the toolkit, as well as an update from the UK government on fighting domestic violence. Now, during this event, we're also fortunate enough to have a speaker who will be sharing her personal story, which includes detailed examples of abuse. I'm alerting this to you because we don't want you to feel any distress. And just in case you want to move to another space at the appropriate time, I'll give you a heads up to do so. My name is Joshua Breckenfeld, and I am honored to be a board member at the Insurance Charities. And since the initiative was funded by the Insurance Charities, we are able to share it with this group in advance of its public launch by the Business in the Community and Public Health England. But let me tell you a little bit about Insurance Charities. Since 1902, the organization has been providing financial and practical support to insurance employees throughout the United Kingdom and also Ireland. And it doesn't matter what people's roles have been in the industry, at what level, at what seniority, we're here to help anybody that we can. And last financial year, for example, we awarded over £900,000 to those in needs. And while we're proud of that financial support, we also look to provide some practical support and guidance as well, which brings us here today. And many of our beneficiaries have endured emotional, financial, and sometimes physical abuse for years and have reached the tipping point where they've had to leave. Taking this huge step requires great bravery. It's often fraught with risk and often comes with great personal loss, including family, friends, support network, home, and access to money. So with that sort of background, and to talk more about our involvement with the toolkit, and what really spurred the Insurance Charities to get involved, I'd like to introduce my CEO, the Insurance Charities Chief Executive, Anna-Leah Joy.
Thank you, Josh, and good morning, everybody. Thank you so much for joining us today. At the Insurance Charities, we've seen an increasing number of applications from people affected by domestic abuse. One case recently included somebody who had been abused not only by her partner, but also by her children. That added additional mental trauma and distress to an already tragic situation. Each application that comes to us needs tailor-made support. Some people are thinking about leaving a domestic abuse situation. They need reassurance that if they do that, they will be able to cope financially and start again. Some already have left and are in temporary accommodation. That could be with family or friends. It could be in a hostel. Those people are looking to start again in a new home that they can feel secure in and where they will feel safe. And in those circumstances, we can help with advance rent and deposit and setting up. Many people want to be able to support themselves, but sometimes they need just that initial bit of help to get going again and to feel that they're believed and that they do have a future. Others will need ongoing support for some time, and there we can help with perhaps therapy or counselling, which isn't available on the NHS. So they might need a supplement to their income, and we can do that too. As you can imagine, when any relationship breaks down, there is a period of time when discussions have to take place about how finances are going to be shared so that the individuals can be supported as well as any dependent children. Where that relationship has involved domestic abuse, those discussions are very, very difficult and sometimes can't even be had. So the Insurance Charities can step in with an understanding ear so that all organisations are involved in putting together a package which best meets the needs of the applicant. It's really important that we look to work with employers and other organisations to ensure that whatever a person needs, they can access and that they really do have the chance of a future. Thank you, Josh.
Thank you, Joy. I'd like to now introduce Elizabeth Filkin, who is the founder and chair of EIDA. Elizabeth, you founded EIDA in 2018, and previously you served as the Chief Executive of Citizens Advice, as well as Deputy CEO of London Docklands, and you were the adjudicator for the HM Revenue and Customs and Parliamentary Commission on Standards. That sounds really grand. But today, can we hear from you in your role as chair of EIDA?
Well, thank you very much, Joss and Annalie Joy, not only for that introduction, which is very kind, but for hosting this very important event, and I think for making clear the commitment of the insurance charities to this issue. It's been vital for us, through your generous sponsorship, that we were able to produce the most popular downloaded resource that we have, the toolkit. When I approached Annalie Joy way back in 2017, saying, well, we've set up this organisation and we think that employers need some help and perhaps a toolkit, would you help fund it? We had as a target getting 50 employers involved. We now have 750 plus members who are working on domestic abuse. And I have to say, to large part due to the toolkit, because we were offering employers something useful. So I can't thank the insurance charities enough. The toolkit does underpin what the business community is doing to support victims of domestic abuse in their businesses. And as Annalie Joy has said, we've now joined with Business in the Community and Public Health England to revise this important resource. And that's what we're launching today. The resource needed improving because of what we've all learned because of the pandemic. It's increased awareness of domestic abuse across society, but it's also highlighted the vital role that employers can play. They're often now the first people who recognise that domestic abuse is happening because they're on Zoom and they get worrying things coming in front of them in one way or another. So the toolkit needed updating to take into account the fact that there looks like being a permanent shift in the way people work, that people will work at home, and home for domestic abuse victims is not a safe place. So it was very important to get it updated. It offers practical guidance about how to support staff, not only in the workplace, which it continues to do, but of course when they're working from home, and how to respond. This would not be possible without the insurance charities' sponsorship and the work that the insurance charities team have done to make this happen, and we're most grateful. Just to tell you a little bit about the Employers Initiative on Domestic Abuse, we do have several members who are insurance companies, and we're very glad to have you. We hope after today we'll have some more. Our vision is simple. We want every employer in Britain, however small or large, to take domestic abuse seriously and help any staff who face that. We also want them to alert all the rest of their staff, many of whom won't know anything about domestic abuse, as to what it is, what the signs are, how to be helpful. Because if that happens, those people will be able to help their friends and relatives and people in their communities. Most people in Britain, thank goodness, are in work, so it's a huge workforce to help people who are facing domestic abuse. If you go on our website, you will see we've got lots of resources that employers can use. Everything from a free downloadable app, and lots of training opportunities and standard policies that people can use. So please do join us. It's free. It takes a moment, go on our website and join us, and then you'll have access to those forms of support. And of course, we do update people all the time to make sure that businesses are aware of what's happening. We also seek to bring about change. We work impartially, of course, with the domestic abuse sector, with academics, with government and other opinion formers to raise awareness about domestic abuse. And we try to keep our employers' members up to date on those initiatives. I'm sure Sarah will talk about this, but as you'll know, a recent development is the important Domestic Abuse Act, which has now been passed. The landmark piece of legislation, we believe. It provides more protection for the millions of people who sadly face domestic abuse in Britain. And it will strengthen the measures to tackle perpetrators. It's going to be implemented across the criminal justice system and the local agencies later this year. And it will be monitored to see if it is working and if people are doing the things that the Act requires. We've got a fact sheet, which I hope people will find handy, on our website, which gives employers information about the Act. But just to alert you, there is now a formal definition of domestic abuse. It's not just physical violence. It can also be emotional, coercive or controlling. And of course, there can be economic abuse involved. So employers do need to alert staff, particularly HR and indeed domestic abuse leads, on what the Act is suggesting for employers. It was very good, we thought, that controlling or coercive behaviour offence, which has been important, is now extended to cover post-separation abuse. So that means that any of your employees who are already separated and you believed things were now going well, they may still suffer from domestic abuse, so you should watch out for that. And the threat to disclose intimate images is now illegal. So you need to keep an eye on your own technology, because of course people do get abused through the work technology, let alone the work phones. So you do need to keep an eye on all of that. GPs and other health professionals are now banned from charging a victim who needs a letter to get legal aid. So you shouldn't let any of your employees be faced with that cost. We'll go on producing regular updates as the Act is implemented, but to keep you up to date, please join us. I've got 3 things that I'd like you to take away from today. Every business, we believe, no matter its size, location or sector, can play a part in tackling domestic abuse. What might appear to be very small steps in your business can make a huge difference to somebody experiencing abuse. As I've mentioned, we've got lots of free resources on our website. I've mentioned the app. There are awareness posters you could use and template policies, including Sharon's policy. And thirdly, please use your voice outside your business as well as inside. We believe it's only by us all working together and sharing best practice and being the advocates for what does work that we can change the approach to domestic abuse and hopefully reduce it, even more hopefully reduce the deaths that occur from domestic abuse. So please get your spokespeople and directors to share outside with their other stakeholders what you're doing. Please tweet it, please put it on LinkedIn, because the more people hear what good businesses are doing on domestic abuse, we believe more will join us all. So finally, I'm delighted to see that two other people who we regard as excellent supporters of the work that we've been doing are on the panels today. Fiona Bowman, who's been a wonderful ambassador for the Employers Initiative, and Sarah Wallen, who has been the driving force behind BASE's report this year on what the support that employers need. So I'm very glad you'll be hearing from them. Finally, from me, thanks again to Annalie Joy, to Victoria Sutton, and to Joss for everything that the Insurance Charities are doing. We look forward to continuing to work with you. Back to you, Josh.
Thank you, Elizabeth. And I do love 3 key takeaways. I think it's really important on these types of formats to make sure that folks know what the information that we're trying to present. And speaking of that, we've also just included in the comment section the relevant websites for the organizations which are here today, so that you can have that as a takeaway to go and read. It is staggering to hear how many organizations are signing up to this and the downloads that are happening, and to know that that's good, because it means that awareness is being raised, but it also just highlights the fact of how large of an issue this is and how much work there still is to be done on it. So thank you for that, Elizabeth. And now I want to turn the conversation over to Fiona Bowman. And as you may have just heard, today Fiona runs her own management consultancy business that leverages her 25 years plus experience in the industry. But today she's here to talk to us about her experience in escaping and ultimately surviving domestic abuse. And I just want to say, Fiona's story is a powerful one, and it may also be distressing for some. So I want to make sure to highlight that now, before I hand the program over to Fiona. And Fiona, welcome. Thank you so much.
Thank you. As you say, my name is Fiona Bowman, and as well as being a successful senior facilities manager for 25 years, I run my own business, Dies at 57. And today, I would like to give you a brief insight into the life of a survivor and how difficult it may be for one of your colleagues who's in an abusive relationship to hold down a job and operate effectively at work. I was born and brought up in a little place on the east coast of Scotland called Dysart, hence the name of my company. When I was 16, I left home and I went to Edinburgh to train to be a nurse. And it was there, in the first few weeks of my course, that I met Derek. He seemed funny. He was different, and he came from a world that I hadn't known. Our relationship started with flowers and poems and chocolates and very early declarations of love. He very quickly decided that he wanted us to get married, and that he was so in love with me, he wanted me to move in with him so that he could look after me. Huge red flags that I now know about. He isolated me from friends and family and systematically took over my life. He didn't like me nursing male patients or working with male colleagues. So after 1.5 years of the course, he convinced me that nursing wasn't for me. And I left the course and got a job in a bank. I worked for Clydesdale Bank, moving around various branches in Scotland, trying to conceal injuries. Then I went to work at their international branch in Edinburgh, and eventually I got a job as a foreign exchange cashier at Standard Chartered Bank in Edinburgh. And throughout the 11 years of our relationship, the violence and abuse escalated. And eventually I ended up in Edinburgh Royal Infirmary Severe Head Injuries Unit. Having my job was important. Work was the place I could be me. Home was where I was violated and abused. Work was my oasis. I wasn't stupid. The work that I did was sometimes quite complex. But as the day went on, I would become more nervous about going home. And if he rang me during the day and started to shout down the phone, calling me horrible names, I would try to pretend to my work colleagues that everything was fine. I'm sure people could hear and see, but no one said anything. No one wants to interfere. He constantly accused me of having affairs with my colleagues, and I couldn't go to nights out or social events because I would never know what sort of mood he would be in when I got home. And when he hurt me and hit me, I had bruises. I had finger marks on my neck where he tried to strangle me, and I would have to wear polo necks and long sleeves, even in summer. Sometimes, when he had kicked and battered me, my ribs hurt so much I could hardly walk, and I would have to call in sick. My manager told me that I was going to get another warning about my poor attendance record, and he was also going to have to discipline me for being overdrawn without authority. How can you tell your colleagues when dreadful things happen? He kicked and hurt my old English sheepdog, Heidi, and wouldn't let me take her to a vet. The RSPCA see massive links between domestic abuse and animal abuse. Perpetrators will target pets and use them as part of their campaign of terror. One day at work, an ambulance was called because I was having a miscarriage. I couldn't tell my colleagues or my boss that he kicked and punched me the night before when I told him I was pregnant. I still went back to him because he said that if he couldn't have me, no one else could. And if I left, he would come and find me and kill me. And I believed him. So there was no escape. My only escape was work. He had a serrated diver's knife in the drawer by the bed, and I was terrified that he would use it on me. And he had a fascination with guns, and there was one in the cabinet. Just the threat of weapons is enough to keep you afraid, and you can't tell anyone. It's like living in a twilight world. There are so many forms of abuse that you can't tell people about. Often you'll be at work, but your head is back to what happened last night. Presenteeism, they call it. Being there, but not being there in your mind. Marie-France Hirigoyen wrote a book called Stalking the Soul. In it, she describes the destructive legacy of shame. Shame that you have allowed this to happen. Shame that someone might find out. And shame that you cannot break free. Financial abuse is another element that affects you. At one point, I was working 3 jobs. I couldn't keep things going. I couldn't tell my boss where we were such dire financial straits. We had rent arrears, credit card debt, expensive high-interest loans, and all the time I was too ashamed to tell anyone about the financial chaos. They say that 74% of victims stay longer because of debt. So, after the last worst beating, I ended up in Edinburgh Royal Infirmary, and when the nurses were going through my things, they found the keys to the bank vaults and insisted that they ring my manager and get him to come and get them. I didn't want him to see me. I was ashamed, but he came in, and that was the start of a part of my story where my employers helped me escape and helped to change my life. So what did they do? Well, one of the most important things that they did was to believe me, to be non-judgmental. Someone from HR came, and I will always remember what she said. You won't be listening to me right now, but when you're ready, give me a call and we'll help you to escape. She left me her business card, and it took me a few weeks to pluck up the courage to reach out for help, but I did. They gave me time off to sort things out. They let me go to see the bank's solicitors so that I could start divorce proceedings. They let me have time off to go and see my landlord and get my name taken off the tenancy. They let me go a few minutes early to go and sort my financial affairs. I managed to borrow money and pay off the debts and leave my credit score intact. They transferred me to a branch 400 miles away in London. They covered my tracks and they told everyone that I had left, including my ex, when he came and camped outside the bank for weeks after I had gone, questioning everyone, approaching my colleagues, approaching my parents, demanding that they tell him where I was. And using my job as the vehicle that carried me away from my abuser and leaving my dog Heidi, one of the hardest things I have ever done, and another reason that victims don't want to leave. Travelled from Edinburgh to London, and I started a new life with a hold on what I stood up in and a job to go to on the Monday in the City of London at Standard Chartered Bank in King William Street. I didn't know where I was going to sleep that night, but I managed to find a hotel, which was actually a DSS hostel, and I checked in and locked the door of my little room, knowing that whatever lay ahead of me, I would never go back to the horror of the abusive relationship that I had left. Over time, I changed from banking to a career in facilities management, and I started to climb the ladder of success, not looking back and not telling anyone about the fact that I had been a victim of domestic abuse. I worked for some of the biggest organisations. At Goldman Sachs, I was a property manager for their London headquarters and their Moscow, Paris and Zurich offices. I was a facilities manager for HSBC. I helped Bank of America move into their new building at 5 Canada Square. And eventually, I became head of facilities client side at Lloyd's Register in Fenchurch Street. But it wasn't until I was general manager of Lloyd's of London in that famous Richard Rogers building in the city that many of you will know, managing 170 support staff, that I felt comfortable telling my story. I didn't want to be perceived as weak and not able to take on senior management positions. Many victims in senior roles don't disclose for exactly that reason. We have to change that narrative. And so it was in 2004 that I wrote my book, having written some of the stories in notebooks over the years as a catharsis. I rang Refuge, the charity, and asked them if they knew a publisher who would help me publish. They rang back a couple of days later, not with a publisher, but with a request from Jenny Murray on Radio 4 Women's Hour, who wanted to interview me. So the first time I told my story was on national radio. I don't believe in doing anything by halves. And I've been invited to speak in some amazing places. I've been on the BBC Breakfast Red Sofa. I've spoken at some very high-profile conferences. Mansion House, number 10 Downing Street, Guildhall, Hillsborough Castle, and I've trained over 1,000 Surrey police officers. And today, talking to all of you on this important meeting. Having missed out on college because of being in my abusive relationship, it was with some excitement that I embarked on an MBA course part-time in the evenings. And to my absolute delight, in the year 2000, I graduated, proving to myself that I wasn't stupid. I'm a chartered member of the Institute of Workplace and Facilities Management, and I've become a fellow of the Chartered Management Institute. People don't quite get why I put all of these letters after my name at every opportunity. They don't know how amazing it is for someone who was beaten within an inch of her life to be taken seriously in business and to have achieved such excellent qualifications. In 2015, I became a member of a city livery company, the Worshipful Company of Security Professionals. I became a freeman of the company and then a freeman of the City of London. And as is my right as a freeman, I herded my sheep over London Bridge. 2 years later, I became a liveryman of the company. And we, amongst other things, raise money to help ex-services and ex-blue light professionals who may have fallen on hard times, who need assistance. And the book, Did I Wake You, Pet? Well, it's available on Amazon and from the publishers Austin Macaulay. This little book is being read all over the place. It provides an insight into the chaotic life of a victim, and it's being read by business people, nurses, teachers, magistrates, police officers, Crown Prosecution Service employees, and people from many other walks of life. When I launched the book in 2017, I managed to track down Graham Whitaker, the manager of Standard Chartered Bank in Edinburgh, who helped me all those years ago. I was proud to tell him about all of the amazing things that have happened since he helped me escape. He doesn't think that he did very much, but I know that he did. I call this presentation From the Cupboard to the City, because on a Friday night, I used to hide in the airing cupboard to avoid a beating from my husband. I have achieved success in my career and have managed some of the most iconic buildings in the City of London and beyond. My life is good. To have come from the horror of abuse to where I am now is pretty wonderful. And every day I wake up and I'm glad to be alive. And the reason I speak out in campaign, you might have a Fiona in your workplace, turning up every day, desperately trying to be taken seriously by colleagues, wanting to be respected and normal. And if workplaces can put policies and structures in place where victims, both male and female, can be given the time and support they need and be signposted to the professional help that is out there, you might just save a life. I speak on behalf of the 1 in 4 women and the 1 in 6 men who right now are suffering in silence, too terrified to seek help. My motto is, be the change you want to see in the world. Make it yours. Thank you, Josh. I'll pass back to you now.
Thank you, Fiona. And it's an incredible story. It's some staggering statistics, 1 in 4, 1 in 6. But I think your spirit and your perseverance and being the change that you want to see is remarkable. So thank you so much for being here today, for your bravery and the real insight that you've shared on how employers can make a difference. And now, we talked a lot about how the legislative landscape is changing in around this issue. And I'd like to invite Dr. Sarah Wallen into the conversation. Dr. Sarah Wallen is the Senior Policy Advisor at the Department for Business, Energy, and Industrial Strategy. Dr. Wallen has worked to lead the review into workplace support for victims of domestic abuse, and she is with us today to provide that update from government. So, Sarah, may I turn it over to you?
Of course, thank you very much. And I just want to start by saying I'm absolutely humbled to come in and talk at this event, especially coming in after Fiona, but also with our colleagues at EIDA and at the Insurance Charities. So my warmest thank you. I also want to say a big thank you to the Insurance Charities for sponsoring this toolkit. As Elizabeth said, it's one of the most downloaded resources for employers so far, and we know that it will be enormously helpful. Yes, as Josh said, over the last year, my role has been really to take forward basis work on domestic abuse. So I headed up the review into workplace support that we published earlier this year in January. I think a lot of the things I say today is going to echo what the previous speakers have said as well. But I think during the review, we had the opportunity to hear from quite a wide range of stakeholders. We heard from employers, we heard from business representative organisations, consultancy firms, we heard from charities and victims and survivors themselves. And they talked about all the issues that domestic abuse raise in the workplace and the action they are taking to raise awareness and to help people around them experiencing domestic abuse. I think I was often personally really struck by the way in which one individual within an organisation can act as a champion and raise awareness and build understanding of domestic abuse. Many spoke about the important work done by senior business leaders in speaking up about domestic abuse and helping to end the shame and stigma that so sadly still surround this issue. And to others, it was the line manager, a HR contact, or someone who's a colleague who made the world of difference by listening and offering unjudgmental support to signposting. So I think in government, we continue to be really encouraged by the genuine interest and appetite that we see among employers to do more in this area. And the many examples of good practice that are already out there, because I think we're coming from a place where we're not looking to reinvent the wheel, we're looking to get more employers engaged and involved. Because as we know, domestic abuse is a cruel and complex crime. It can affect anyone. It leaves physical, mental, and emotional scars that for some people last a lifetime. 2.3 million victims of domestic abuse each year, of working age 16 to 74. 2/3 are women, 1/3 are men. 2 in 10 offences recorded by the police are domestic abuse related. 2 women each week and 1 man each month are killed in England and Wales by a current or former partner. So in government, we think that the consequences of domestic abuse are so devastating that we have to work together, both across government and with society. So as a base official, we work very closely with the Home Office and the Ministry of Justice. I think over the last year, they've been championing a series of initiatives such as the Ask for Annie COVID scheme with pharmacies. They've had the You Are Not Alone campaign during lockdown. But obviously, they've also achieved a historic milestone in receiving royal assent for the domestic abuse bill in April. So I think we see this legislation as a real game changer. It will help millions of people affected by these awful crimes by strengthening the response across all agencies, from the police and courts to local authorities and service providers. I think what's important for us as well is that what this legislation really aims to do is to put domestic abuse on top of everyone's agenda. So it legislates for the first time for a statutory definition of domestic abuse. I won't repeat it because it's already been said in this event, but I think what's important to point out is that this updated toolkit incorporates that definition, so it's a really useful tool. So following the report, our own focus as the business department is really this, to encourage and support employers up and down the country to become aware of domestic abuse and take action to support anyone in the workforce who may be suffering. We will then hopefully move into a phased programme of delivery of the specific commitments we have made. But during the review, we had a range of suggestions about what practical steps employers could take. Awareness raising, signposting, considering the role of line managers, training opportunities, have a workplace champion, access to safe spaces at work, flexibility, leave. I think what came out of this was a real call for more employers to have a workplace policy on domestic abuse, have an up-to-date, clear policy that's available that helps both management and staff to know what to expect around these issues and to raise confidence. I should also say that we know that the last year has been exceptionally difficult for many. Businesses have had to adapt and respond to the coronavirus pandemic. It's also shone a light on the hidden harm of domestic abuse. According to Refuge, the charity, caused domestic abuse helplines increased by 61% since lockdown began. So for me, it's a bit of a call to businesses as you know, thinking about your future models of working and potentially moving into hybrid forms of working. Now is the time to think about what practical steps can be taken to support members of staff who are experiencing domestic abuse. So a plug for this toolkit, it provides you help and guidance on this issue, which is crucial. A few words on why we think this matters to employers. I think the toolkit sets out the economic reasons why you should be mindful of this issue. It also highlights that employers have a duty of care towards their employees. So having a policy on domestic abuse can be one way in which you can demonstrate that you're taking this issue seriously. I think third, as previous stories have said, it's absolutely central. Employers can make a real difference. We had many stories about how the workplace is the only place of safety and respite for many victims of domestic abuse. We heard about colleagues and managers can often be the only other people outside the home that victims and survivors talk to each day. So you can be uniquely placed to help spot the signs, respond sympathetically, and help refer to specialist services when the time is right and based on consent from the victim and survivor. I think we also had stories about where maybe more can be done and more awareness can be raised and better understanding can be there. So I think the toolkit will help enormously with this space. Because as our Minister for Business, Paul Scully, who's very engaged in this agenda, he said this many times, it's not about asking employers to become experts on domestic abuse. The experts are out there, make use of them. But what our work is about is to break the stigma associated with domestic abuse. We want to help all employees know what practical steps you can take. Every person in every workplace should feel comfortable raising this issue. And we know that's hard. We know it can be very hard. But they should feel secure secure in raising the matter and feel that it shouldn't reflect badly on them as an individual or undermine their position in any way in the workplace. So just again, this toolkit is just an excellent resource that will inform and empower employers to play their part in domestic abuse. So for my action points, I think join the Excellent Employers Initiative on Domestic Abuse. They can help and they can support you. Make use of this toolkit to develop your own policies, working also perhaps with your local domestic abuse charities, and spread the word to your contacts and anyone you know. Thank you so much. And I'm now handing back to Josh.
Yeah, thank you, Dr. Wallen. And it's great to see some real push from government, it's on a practical way, you know, that folks don't need to become experts. They just need to know how to access the experts on this issue. I think that's a really brilliant point. And so I'd like to just thank all of our speakers today for what I think has been a brilliant session, and also thank everyone that has taken the time to join us and to hear about the toolkit. We will be making a recording of this session, and it will be available on the Business and Communities website for anyone that wants to review what we discussed, or maybe even colleagues that you think should probably have a listen to it. And we'll include the links, as I mentioned, in the chat section. Of course, I'd be remiss if I'd let anyone go out of the room today without asking you and encouraging you to please download the toolkit today, which is on the Business and the Communities website. As I mentioned, we've included these links in the chat function, so feel free to just copy and paste from there. And do consider joining EIDA if your organization is not already signed up. You know, they have a list of over 700 organizations, and that's growing. The membership is free and will provide you some fantastic tools and resources to support your work in this area. And finally, please do encourage any insurance employees struggling either financially or otherwise to apply for help with the Insurance Charities where appropriate. And further information can be found on the Insurance Charities website, which is also shared in the chat function, where you can also find a simple downloadable application. So that is it for me. And on behalf of the panelists, thank you all very much. Enjoy the rest of your sunny day here in London.